On August 14, 1987, police in Millbrook, Pennsylvania removed a porcelain doll from the basement of 428 Cherrywood Lane. The doll was still wet. Its dress clung to its body. Water dripped from its painted hair onto the concrete floor, forming a dark puddle that smelled of algae and decay. The 3 children who had lived in that house were found that same morning in separate locations, miles apart from each other. All 3 had drowned. There was no water in their lungs, no lakes nearby, no pools, no bathtubs filled. Just the doll, dripping in that basement, its glass eyes reflecting the flashlight beams of the officers who found it. One officer would later say he heard it breathing. Another claimed the water never stopped dripping, even after they placed it in an evidence bag. This is the story of what they called the Millbrook doll. And this is the story of what it did to those children. Rebecca Hartley was 7 years old when her mother bought the doll at an estate sale on Maple Drive. The sale was for the belongings of Eleanor Pritchard, an elderly woman who had died alone in her home 3 weeks earlier. Neighbors reported a smell. The details of her death were not discussed publicly, but the coroner noted extensive water damage to the body, despite the fact that Eleanor had been found in her bed, on the 2nd floor, nowhere near plumbing. Rebecca's mother, Susan Hartley, paid $12 for the doll. It was beautiful, she said, pristine condition, porcelain face, hand-painted features, a blue dress with white lace trim, the kind of doll you display on a shelf. Rebecca named it Charlotte. She took Charlotte everywhere, to school, to dinner, to bed. Susan thought it was sweet, the way her daughter cared for that doll, until Rebecca started talking to it, real conversations. She would pause, as if listening to responses. Susan asked her once what Charlotte said. Rebecca looked up with those innocent eyes and whispered that Charlotte told her about the water, about how peaceful it was beneath the surface, how quiet, how cold. On the morning of August 9th, 1987, Susan found Rebecca's bed empty. The sheets were soaked. The pillow was drenched. She found her daughter in the hallway, lying face down in a puddle that had no source. Rebecca's lips were blue. Her eyes were open. The coroner found no water in her lungs. Yet the autopsy confirmed drowning. Impossible, they said, but true. Charlotte sat on Rebecca's bed, perfectly dry, watching with those glass eyes. After Rebecca's death, Susan Hartley could not stay in that house. She moved in with her sister, Margaret, who lived 2 streets over on Birch Avenue with her 9-year-old son, Thomas. Susan brought nothing with her except clothes and grief. She did not bring the doll. She left Charlotte in Rebecca's room, sitting on the shelf where Susan thought she could forget about it. But 3 days after the funeral, Thomas came home from school and found Charlotte in his bedroom, sitting on his dresser, wearing that blue dress. Thomas asked his mother how the doll got there. Margaret looked at Susan. Susan's face went white. She had not brought it. The house on Cherrywood Lane was locked. Margaret wanted to throw the doll away. Susan, through tears, said she couldn't. It was all she had left of Rebecca. So Charlotte stayed. Thomas began waking up with wet pajamas. His sheets would be cold and damp each morning, though he insisted he hadn't wet the bed. He was too old for that, he said. Margaret checked for leaks in the ceiling. Nothing. She checked the windows. Nothing. Then Thomas started talking about the dreams. He dreamed of a lake that didn't exist, of dark water filled with reaching hands, of a voice that sounded like his cousin Rebecca, calling to him from below the surface, telling him to come down where it's quiet. On August 12th, Thomas didn't come home from school. They found him at 11 p.m. in the basement of an abandoned building 4 miles away. He was lying in 3 inches of standing water from a broken pipe. His body was cold. His lungs were clear. Drowning, the coroner said again. Impossible drowning. When Margaret returned to the house, screaming, sobbing, she went to Thomas's room to tear it apart. Charlotte was gone. She found her an hour later, in Susan's room, sitting on the bed. The doll's dress was wet. Susan Hartley lost her mind in the days between Thomas's death and her own end. Margaret had her committed to Millbrook Psychiatric Hospital on August 13th. Before the ambulance arrived, Susan locked herself in the bathroom and tried to drown the doll in the sink. She held it under the running water, screaming at it, begging it to stop. The porcelain wouldn't crack. The paint didn't run. The doll's eyes stared up through the water, unblinking. When the paramedics finally broke down the door, Susan was unconscious on the floor, soaking wet, the doll cradled in her arms. Margaret took custody of Charlotte then. She drove to the police station, the doll wrapped in a garbage bag in her trunk, and she told them everything. The detective, a man named Paul Brennan, listened with barely concealed skepticism. "Grief does strange things to people," he said. "Coincidences happen. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of murder. Tragic accidents, he called them." He refused to take the doll. Margaret left it on his desk anyway and walked out. Detective Brennan had a daughter. Her name was Amy. She was 6 years old. When he came home that evening, he found Amy playing with Charlotte in the living room. His wife, Karen, said the doll had been left on their porch with a note that said, "For Amy." She thought it was a gift from Brennan. He hadn't wanted to scare her, so he said nothing. That night, Amy woke up screaming about water in her room. Brennan ran to her. The carpet was wet. The walls were dripping. He carried Amy out of the house in his arms, and when he looked back, he saw Charlotte sitting in the hallway, watching, waiting. Amy Brennan was found the next morning, August 14th, in the dry fountain of Millbrook Park. No water had run through that fountain in 10 years. Her body was soaked. Her hair smelled of lake water. Drowning. Impossible drowning. After Amy's death, the investigation became a manhunt for a killer who didn't exist. The FBI was called in. Forensic teams swept the Brennan house, the Hartley house, the locations where the bodies were found. They found no connections except the doll. Charlotte was taken into evidence, locked in the property room of the Millbrook Police Department. 3 officers were assigned to guard the evidence. Protocol, they said. On the second night, Officer Daniel Ruiz heard something. A dripping sound, slow, rhythmic. He followed the sound to the evidence locker. Water was seeping from under the door. When he opened it, the doll was sitting upright in the sealed plastic bag, surrounded by a pool of water. The bag had no holes. The room had no leaks. Ruiz tried to leave. The door wouldn't open. He radioed for help. The other officers heard him screaming. When they finally broke through, Ruiz was on the floor, convulsing, his lungs filling with fluid that had no source. He survived. Barely. He never spoke again. The doll was transferred to the State Police Forensic Lab in Harrisburg. Dr. Leonard Voss, a psychologist specializing in mass hysteria, was assigned to examine it. He believed the doll was an inanimate object being blamed for unrelated tragedies. He took Charlotte home to study her, to prove there was nothing supernatural, nothing evil. His wife found him 3 days later in their bathtub. The water was running. His body was submerged. The doll floated beside him. Dr. Voss had drowned in 4 inches of water. His eyes were open, his expression was one of terror, and Charlotte, wet and dripping, was smiling. The doll was never destroyed. Officials feared what might happen if they tried. Fire wouldn't burn it, they said. Water wouldn't dissolve it. Crushing it seemed to invite something worse. So they sealed Charlotte in a climate-controlled containment unit at an undisclosed location. That's the official story. But the unofficial story is darker. In 1993, a janitor at a storage facility in Laurelwood reported finding a box marked with a police evidence tag. Inside was a porcelain doll in a blue dress. It was wet. He touched it. 2 days later, his daughter drowned in her bedroom. In 2004, a collector of cursed objects claimed to have acquired the Millbrook doll. He posted photographs online. The doll's dress was damp in every picture. He stopped posting after 3 weeks. His account went silent. His family reported him missing. They found him in a reservoir 30 miles from his home, drowning. In 2016, an urban explorer broke into an abandoned government warehouse outside Pittsburgh. She filmed everything. In the final minutes of her footage, she opens a metal case. Inside is a doll. Porcelain face, blue dress, white lace. The girl laughs. She picks it up. The camera falls. You can hear her gasping, choking. The sound of water splashing on concrete. The video cuts out. She was found a week later in a dried-up well. Her body was soaked. To this day, no one knows where Charlotte is. Some say she's still in that warehouse. Some say she was moved again. But every few years, someone reports finding a wet porcelain doll. And every few years, someone drowns. Impossible drownings. The kind that have no explanation. The kind where the victim is found far from water. The kind where their lungs are empty, but their bodies are soaked. And if you ever find a doll, beautiful and pristine, with a blue dress and glass eyes, check the fabric. If it's wet, even slightly damp to the touch, put it down. Walk away, because Charlotte is still looking for playmates. And she loves children who aren't afraid of the water. 3 children drowned in 1987, but the Millbrook doll's body count didn't stop there. In the next investigation, we'll uncover the other victims, the ones the police never connected, the drownings that happened before Eleanor Pritchard died, because Charlotte didn't start with Rebecca Hartley. She's been drowning children for a lot longer than that. The question isn't whether the doll is real. The question is, how many others has she taken? And why does the water never stop dripping?